Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my colleague, Forbes staff writer, Zach Everson. Zach, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
As you and I have been talking about now for months, former President Donald Trump is facing a cash crunch after his mounting legal issues. And money from Truth Social going public isn't expected to imminently help. But before we dive into that conversation, can you walk us back, tell us why he owes so much money?
He's in a lot of trouble. A lot of legal problems going on there. And he's also, heavily leveraged in some areas as well. He was fined a combined $88 million in two suits where he was found liable, brought by Each and Carroll. He was also fined, I think it's like $455 million and counting by New York State in the civil fraud trial after he was being found liable there. And then I wrote about last week, he's got a $120 million mortgage coming due on 40 Wall Street coming through in 2025. So he's going to, even after he gets these legal problems, he's still going to be facing some mortgages that he's got to deal with.
But it does sound like there is a bright spot for the former president financially. On Friday, Digital World voted to merge with his Trump Media and Technology Group. This move has been years in the making. Can you talk about what led up to this merger?
Yeah, getting $3.3 billion richer is certainly a bright spot. So a couple years back, Digital World formed. It's a SPAC. It's kind of a shell company that exists just for the purposes of acquiring another company. It decided it wanted to acquire Trump Media. Trump Media was on board with that, so they announced this plan. But it took a long time for them to actually get to this point. The SEC investigated. There are a lot of rules regarding SPACs, and one of them is that they can't have formed knowing who they would want to merge with already. And there was a bunch of evidence that came out that some of the executives of the SPAC had been in communication with some executives at Trump Media before they should have. So there was investigation, there were fines paid. But finally, I guess it was just a couple weeks ago, the SEC said this could go ahead and proceed. The SPAC had its shareholders vote. They, of course, voted overwhelmingly in favor of this. Most people who bought into that SPAC did so with the expectation that they would be buying into Trump Media and Truth Social, which is its major holding there.
So you said $3.3 billion is a bit more than a bright spot. He owes hundreds of millions of dollars, but you're reporting that this won't exactly help him. You write this: the multi-billion-dollar windfall will not help him pay his fines. Quote, it won't even help him secure a bond to cover those fines while he appeals. Why not?
He is locked up for 6 months, and that he is not able to sell any of these any of his stocks, and that's the same with anybody else who is involved in this merger. So it's not like it's just the Donald Trump rule, but he is not allowed to either sell them or use them as collateral, which is not always typical of these kind of mergers. I understood. I talked to 3 experts in IPOs, and they said, it's having a clause in there that specifically precludes using them as collateral was not typical. But that certainly is the case. Now, there is a way around it, in that he could possibly tap into this cash before the 6 months has passed with permission from the board of directors, which includes, I think it's like 3 or 4 former Trump administration officials, some other guy named Donald Trump Jr., who's probably likely to vote however his dad would like. But there are problems with that, too. If they just go ahead and greenlight his dad cashing out on this, the experts I spoke to said that they would almost certainly be hit with a shareholder lawsuit saying like, hey, we bought into this expecting Trump was going to be tied into it for 6 months. Now he cashed out. This is crap. And there would be a big legal issue.
So what's the likelihood of that happening then if there is going to be that big legal issue?
I am not going to give you a likelihood on anything happening with Donald Trump. I mean, who knows? The guy just got $3.3 billion, more than doubled his net worth. So, it's certainly possible. I don't know exactly what they've been discussing. It seems a little bit less likely to happen given what we just know, what we learned today from New York, where instead of having to fork up the entire civil fraud fine and penalty while he appeals, they knocked it down that he only has to do $175 million only. And he has 10 days to get it together. And it sounds like we're reporting that he has about $400 million worth of cash. And he has said that he is able to get that money, get the $175 million from his cash holdings. So in that case, this is something, an option he may not even need to pursue right now. But we'll see as this case proceeds and what that fine ends up being.
So if this isn't an option he needs to pursue, is that good news for him that he doesn't need to pay that in full? Because would that reach the 6 months? Would he be able to tap into this eventually? What does that look like?
He is the master of kicking the can down the road. And, my favorite example of this, favorite's probably not the right word. I think the best example of this was regarding the Trump Hotel in D.C. And that the first business day of his administration, there was a watchdog group that filed a lawsuit accusing Trump of violating the Emoluments Clause by having this hotel that allowed foreign and state governments to pay him money. And in the 4 years of his term, that case did not get resolved. Not only did it not get resolved, it wasn't even resolved who had the rights to file such a case. That part of the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, not even getting on its merits, and then he lost re-election, and the Supreme Court tossed the case as being moot. So he is amazing at being able to do this. I mean, I followed all the lawsuits that were involved in that hotel, and there were so many of them that just never got resolved until the issue disappeared because he sold the hotel and made a nice steady profit on it, and he was out of office. So we're seeing a replay of this. So, all of a sudden being told you needed to turn over $455 million on Monday, and instead you get 10 more days and it's only 175. Great.
It's a lot of money, but it's still better than the hundreds of millions of dollars more. But I do want to get back to Truth Social. You said, or an expert you talked to rather, called this stock different than what they described as a normal Microsoft stock. Can you talk about the differences there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a meme stock in that the fundamentals of Truth Social aren't there in a way they are of a company like Microsoft, is what this expert used as an example. They're profits, there's money, there's actual value in that company by owning it. And they said, if you were to see something where there'd be downward pressure on a company like Microsoft, you would start seeing pension funds and other groups wanting to buy it, thinking, oh, we can get this stock while it's low, great. It's going to be harder to do that if Trump were to sell his True Social or Trump Media stock early. You would see a downward pressure, is what this expert said, because all of a sudden Trump's disassociating himself with it. He's putting a ton more shares on the market, and you're not going to find those big institutional investors jumping in to try to, buy their own shares thinking this is a value because they don't think it is.
Are you surprised then that he is making that $3.3 billion windfall from Truth Social?
Yeah, it's a lot of money for a social media app that's not all that great, doesn't have a lot of users, is largely, pieced together from some open source software is my understanding. But, Donald Trump also has a history of turning nothing into a lot of money and then making it disappear and doing it again. So shame on me for being surprised, but yeah, I'm surprised.
Zach, you're on the Money and Politics team here. You guys have been following this case and all of his legal cases so diligently. What else are you watching out for when it comes to the money here?
It's not just the fines, and that he's leveraged. He's got several mortgages that are due over the next 10, 15 years. The one that's coming up soonest is a $120 million at 40 Wall Street loan that he has there. And that's a building that, due to some changes in its lease, is not really going to be a moneymaker for him in a few years. It's the lease is going to be very difficult for him to make up what he has to pay there. So that's one that's really interesting. At this point, he doesn't have as many banks who are willing to work with him. So trying to find a bank that's going to be willing to give him, $120 million, assuming he does try to refinance, $120 million on a business that is set up to be a money loser come 2033 when the lease changes is going to be very interesting.
You've done a lot of reporting on 40 Wall Street. Can you tell us what is likely going to happen then if he'll have trouble with banks?
He has a history of being able to find places to refinance. That's what happened with Trump Tower. There was a big he had a loan on there. I think it was with Deutsche Bank, and all of a sudden he was refinanced with this bank called Axos Bank, which was not one people really heard of. It started off as like the bank of the internet. So he's probably going to start looking for obscure lenders who are willing to lend him the money.
Zach Everson, per usual, thank you so much for your reporting. I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Always a pleasure.